Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the channel. So immediately when Theory won Money in the Bank, reaction was swift and is sort of divided into two camps: pro-Theory, anti-Theory. Here was my actual reaction when he won Money in the Bank. Oh no. So you can kind of see which side I fell on. But I've had time to reflect on it, and that's why I decided to make this video so we can look at sort of all angles. Now, the two sentiments sort of broke down into two philosophical ideas. Number one, on the pro-Theory side, hey, it's great that WWE's pushing younger stars. This is what we need. Their over-reliance on old-timers is an issue. They need younger stars. They need another John Cena. They need another Roman Reigns, somebody who can sell out stadium shows 10 years from now. On the flip side of that, people thinking that, exactly, Roman Reigns was rammed down our throats for 7 years, and that's what's happening with Theory right now. He's not proven. It's not his time. This is not a Seth Rollins 2014 situation. In fact, even the WrestleJuice audience is split in half. I put up two community threads asking why you guys think it's a good idea or a bad idea, and here are some of your responses. First up from Zach Blackwood says, he didn't qualify and lost earlier in the night. He got rewarded for being a loser. And you can't honestly say, I'm young and I take selfies as main event caliber. Lee the Leo says, I feel like it's too much too soon. He's a hell of a talent, but I just hope he doesn't end up falling flat. On the flip side, these are what his defenders say. From Irish Insight says, I feel as though it's a chance to watch a future main event player mature and grow before our eyes before he finally cashes in. Another friendo said, it's cool to see WWE prop up a younger wrestler, even if I don't fully agree with the way they do it. The over-reliance on aging part-timers is my biggest complaint with WWE, so seeing them try to build new stars is a breath of fresh air. So let's take a look at both sides of this argument. First up, the idea that Theory winning Money in the Bank this year is a bad idea. The first main argument I see is, A, the execution was lazy. Pierce comes out and just says, hey, we're having a great time. I'm going to double up on this and add another person. And that person was Austin Theory. Now, you can sort of read between the lines because of how they've built him up over the past 6 months or so. He's Mr. McMahon's guy. And so it's not a huge leap in logic to think he was backstage, he got on the phone or went to gorilla position and said, hey, Vince, I lost my U.S. championship, but I think I deserve to be in Money in the Bank. Expect the unexpected, right? Your own words. And then Vince gave the go-ahead. Now, yes, it would have been nice to see this actually happen, even though you can kind of piece it together yourself. I am the kind of person who would prefer to be shown what's actually happening as opposed to Pierce coming out and just sort of claiming credit for it. Maybe Pierce's demeanor should have been different. Maybe he said, hey, this is against my wishes and under protest, but this comes from the top. We all know who that is. Here's Theory. So Theory comes in. He doesn't even participate all that much in the match, and he ends up winning Money in the Bank. So is that the kind of heel we're going to expect with Austin Theory? He was dominated by Bobby Lashley earlier in the night. So, and all these other competitors had to qualify to get into the match. I see this as a valid point. The execution of him getting into the match was a bit lazy. Maybe there should have been a couple more twists and turns involved, but that's what we're stuck with. I understand the point here. Another main reason here a lot of people are saying is it's too soon for him. He's yet to develop a character with any amount of dimension to it. This is another complaint that I agree with. I do think that it is actually too soon for Theory. They have not really given this character much dimension. In fact, if you want to try to compare him with Rollins, Rollins immediately when he turned on the Shield had extra layers of dimension to him. We got to see him interact first as a good guy, first as a bad guy, then as a good guy, then as a bad guy again. We had multiple layers of Rollins before he won Money in the Bank. It was obvious this guy was on the precipice of taking it to that next level. So it made sense for him. This isn't quite a Jack Swagger situation either. I feel like Theory clearly, obviously, has a lot more going for him because we've seen him, for example, with The Way, where he was a character who had some dimension. But at this point, the Theory we have on main roster is simply selfie guy. It's in his Tron. It's in everything he does. It's sort of the only thing he really does. The character doesn't have much dimension to him. That doesn't bode well for him running with Money in the Bank. Is creative going to flesh him out? Are they going to add some dimension? Are they going to add any intrigue to his character? we have to rely on WWE to do this. Another point that I think is valid. And here's the last point on the bad idea side of things. He's being pushed down our throat. Clearly, Vince sees him and wants him to be the next John Cena. There's a bit of a resemblance there. They're white dudes that have that sort of, when Cena came in, he had similar gear. He sort of did the prototype thing. He had the haircut that's kind of the same. So I see that Vince McMahon superficially probably sees some John Cena in the guy. But again, we have seen what Austin Theory is capable of. You can go back and look at some of his matches in Evolve and understand just how good he can be in the ring, even though that hasn't really been showcased during his time with WWE. You can see the dimension there. You can see the potential there and why they think he can be the next Cena. It's just we haven't seen it yet on main roster. He's not to the point yet where he's the bad guy that everybody wants to cheer. He hasn't made his Doctor of Thugonomics turn that took Cena to that next level. And I'm not sure we're ever going to see that. But that's not going to stop Vince McMahon. The WWE crowd is coming off of 5 or so, 7 years of having Roman Reigns being pushed down our throat. He still is. He's the double champion, but it's more palatable now because Roman Reigns is a really well-developed character. Some of you may disagree with that. I personally find him very appealing as a character. I love the Tribal Chief stuff. I think it's pretty great. I think ratings reflect that. I think the fact that he is considered an actual draw now is reason to believe that as well. So, but clearly they have high hopes for Austin Theory. And when you get a sense of that, crowds are very, very quickly to take notice. And this is one of those situations where it's clear as day, they want Theory to be a big deal. Will he be able to turn that corner where we're all on board with that? I don't know. So let's take a look at the other side of this equation. Let's take a look at the idea that, hey, this is a good thing. So number one, here's my reason for this being a good idea is out of all the options, the potential for story here is actually the greatest. If you take a look at everybody else, besides maybe Sami Zayn, there's a really intriguing story there if Sami Zayn had won Money in the Bank and Roman Reigns sours on him and Sami sours on the idea of protecting Roman Reigns. But let's be honest, as much as I would love to see it, and I'm sure a lot of you would love to see it, I don't think WWE would ever consider Sami Zayn to be the guy to take both those titles off Roman Reigns. Sami Zayn is amazing, and I think WWE loves him. He's just not that guy. They want somebody more like an Austin Theory who could be the guy that WWE rides with for the next 10 to 15 years. If you take a look at the other people in the match, Seth has already had it. Drew doesn't need it. Madcap Moss is too new and doesn't have any kind of character besides now he's not the joke guy. Sheamus has been there, done that, and Amos is not even close to being ready for anything like that. Riddle just got through with the thing with Roman, even though there's a lot of intriguing story that you could tell potentially with Randy Orton. Orton's not going to be back for a long time. I think Riddle is probably at the point where a Money in the Bank win would have really worked for him because he's where Austin Theory will be, hopefully, in a year. If you take a look a year ago, Riddle was much more one note than he is now. That's the kind of development that we need and want to see somebody when they win Money in the Bank. The thing is, he's just been through a thing with Roman, so I'm not sure revisiting that would really be the wisest move, but you could have just kept that briefcase on him for the long term and see where Riddle was like a year from now, or maybe a little bit less, maybe around WrestleMania. So in terms of the most potential for a story to be told there, I actually do think that Theory is the guy for this. I think if you want to flesh his character out, what better way would it be for a guy to have Money in the Bank and then think to himself, there are so many layers I have to get past. There are so many barriers I need to get past in order to get to Roman Reigns. The Usos, you got this Brock Lesnar SummerSlam match coming up. Solo Sikoa might be coming up to main roster. So there's a lot he has to get through. And there's a lot of character development you can have in that time. Think about it. He's got to cash. Let's say he tries to cash in at SummerSlam. Roman and Brock have their big last man standing match, and Theory comes out. Roman's won, but just barely, and he's coming out to capitalize on Roman being in a last man standing match with Brock Lesnar. Well, Brock Lesnar, let's say he's still up and about. He's pissed off. He just sees this guy coming down. The same guy, by the way, that he F5'd at Elimination Chamber off the top of the pod. He sees this guy coming down trying to take the fruits of the labor that Brock Lesnar just put in. So he comes down, he gets F5'd, he's got to start over. So he starts to realize that, man, I can't cash in on Roman because the Usos are always there, and Roman's barely there. With Roman's new contract, he's hardly ever there. So at some point, maybe he tries and he fails to cash in. Vince cuts him loose as the chosen one, and Theory goes off. I was supposed to be the guy. Crowd maybe starts seeing, okay, now we're sort of siding with this guy because we've seen him try to come up against insurmountable odds, and maybe Theory starts to step it up in the ring a little bit. That's sort of going to be necessary for Theory because nobody likes a guy who can't compete in the ring. Nobody buys into that as champion. So Theory has to be the guy who can at least compete for the U.S. title with Bobby Lashley, but he got dominated at Money in the Bank by Bobby Lashley. So he needs to at least be able to compete on that level for this to be realistic. And then eventually he finds his way to that point, and the Royal Rumble, he wins the Royal Rumble in advance of like WrestleMania 40. So not this coming year, but next year. And then maybe he beats Roman Reigns at that point, and then he's your guy. That's going to take some very careful long-term booking. This is going to have to be like a Paul Heyman project or something for it to actually work. And yes, it would involve a Money in the Bank cash-in failure, but if done right, the crowd will be with you for that story. It can be an intriguing story, and I think Austin Theory can be the guy to get you there. The only problem is, will they tell that story? So the last argument to be made that this is a good thing is we've already seen proof that Austin Theory can be so much more. If they did write that story, we know he can carry it. He has the ability to do that. We've seen it with The Way in NXT. And I think that's kind of all the proof you really need. The last argument here is, of course, WWE does absolutely need to push new stars. They absolutely have a problem where there isn't anybody on their roster besides Roman Reigns now and Brock Lesnar who can help them sell those big stadium shows. We know the WWE wants to sell like 8 stadium pay-per-views a year, maybe even 12. They're not going to get there with the current way they have their roster, with only Brock and Roman able to sell those tickets. As much as I love Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, they simply have not been built to the point where they can sell those types of tickets, and that's kind of important. You don't want to have a stadium show with 10,000 people there. So building Theory now is the way to get to him being the next Cena in 2032 or whatever. So the bottom line is it a good idea or is it a bad idea to put Money in the Bank on Theory right now? Well, again, it all depends on what happens from here. My guess is long-term is that creative is going to struggle to find a way to keep it interesting with him and the briefcase. And it's only going to end up hurting their attempt to make a star out of him. But maybe super long-term, they'll use this as part of his story. And so when he really does turn that corner into the bad guy that everybody cheers, and then super over babyface, which is usually how it goes. My final verdict is this is probably a bad idea. Roman has both titles, and it doesn't make any sense for a guy like Theory right now, even over the next year, to be the guy to cash in on Roman. Nobody's going to believe it, and I don't have faith in WWE creative for them to execute that plan long term. There are 2 other names here that make a lot more sense than, actually 3 more names that make a lot more sense in the short term. Number 1, you got Drew McIntyre. Imagine Drew doesn't need to use Money in the Bank for Clash of the Castle. He's able to win his way into a number 1 contender spot for Clash of the Castle. They go to the UK. Drew and Roman have that match. Let's say Roman wins, but only because of some shenanigans from the Usos. And then Drew McIntyre says, all right, fine. I'm cashing in right now. We're going to have an immediate rematch now that he's maybe Claymored the Usos out of the way after they've screwed him over. And then he ends up beating Roman, and you get the biggest explosion of a cheer of all time. And then you're kind of making Drew McIntyre into another guy potentially who could be that stadium sellout guy. So... but I don't know if they're going to have Roman drop the titles in advance of WrestleMania. They probably want to wait until after the Rock match. So I don't know that's going to happen, but that's one potential. Or you got Seth. Seth Rollins, of course, has talked endlessly about wanting to one-up the greatest cash-in of all time at WrestleMania. And what if he did that after Roman's match with The Rock at the next WrestleMania? Plus, you still have Cody Rhodes out there, and who knows how that's going to factor into this. So I don't know. They got a lot of pieces up in the air, and I feel like there's at least 3 or 4 people. The other guy's Riddle. There's at least 3 or 4 people that are above Theory in the pecking order that probably could use that briefcase sooner than later, and Austin Theory should have waited another year. So in the end, was it a bad idea? Yeah, probably, but not that bad of an idea if you have plans for the guy and you can see those plans through. That's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. Here's another video for you to watch. I'll see you over there. Do me a favor, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We'll see you over at that video.